103, Study Session 5, Divine Command Theory of Morality. Introduction. Attempts by many people in society to justify a moral position by appealing to some religious tenets aligns with divine command theory of morality. Thus, this study session will appraise the main claims of the theory, learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain the main claim of the divine command theory of morality and critically discuss the problems emanating from the theory. Claims of divine command theory of morality. The basic claim of the divine command theory of morality is that the ultimate and only valid standard for determining what is right or wrong, good or bad, is God's law or commandments, as we have them in the various religious traditions of the world. Thus, going by the theory, an action is morally bad or wrong if only it is forbidden by God, and it is morally good or right if it is either permitted or required by God. For the divine command theorists, nothing is good or bad in itself. Rather, it is what God says about actions that determine whether they are good or not. This is the same way a legislative pronouncement determines what is legal or illegal. Hence, were it to be that God says that killing of human beings is required or permitted, then it would be morally wrong not to kill human beings. Should God say that promise keeping is prohibited, it would then be morally wrong to keep one's promise. Tip: in divine command theory of morality, an action is morally bad or wrong if only it is forbidden by God, and it is morally good or right if it is either permitted or required by God. Some of the divine command theorists of morality contend that divine prescriptions are morally binding on all persons simply because God has the power to reward the obedient and punish the offenders. Many religions hold a belief in the idea of divine punishment, both in life and also in the afterlife, and it is held by divine command theorists that it is the fear of such punishments that motivates people to obey divine commands that are morally binding. In the alternative, others might be motivated to obey divine commandments because of the desire to be rewarded with certain earthly and eternal benefits. Another consideration that might be presented for the acceptance of God's command as authoritative in moral matters is that we owe him a duty of gratitude that necessitates that we obey him. This duty is born out of the fact that he created us and has given us different kinds of benefits and blessings according to his divine grace. In addition, advocates of the divine command theory of morality contend that we should abide by the dictates of God because, given his attributes as an all-good being, he would only command those things that are good. Given his character, he would not require us to do anything evil, wrong, or injurious. Problems with the divine command theory of morality. The question of the existence of God. Divine command theory of morality rests on the assumptions that God exists and that all humans accept that he exists. The truth, however, is that not everyone accepts that God exists, and skepticism about the existence of God seriously undermines the theory. This is because we can only accept and appeal to God's law or commands as the foundation of morality and the ideal standard for determining what is right or wrong in society, if we believe that. The truth, however, is that not everyone accepts that God exists, and skepticism about the existence of God seriously undermines the theory. This is because we can only accept and appeal to God's laws or commands as the foundation of morality and the ideal standard for determining what is right or wrong in our society. If we believe that he exists and is interested in how we order our affairs as humans, three categories of people are identifiable in society: the theist, who believe that God exists; the atheist, who deny that God exists; and the agnostics, who are not sure if God exists or not. From the above, it is clear that atheists cannot accept the divine command theory of morality. Likewise, the agnostics will not accept the theory as they are not convinced that God exists. The peculiar problem confronting the theist is that because not everyone believes in the existence of God, she or he will not be able to convince atheists and agnostics to accept the divine command theory of morality. Apart from using accepted moral principles to guide our actions, we will also engage in moral debates designed to convince others about the rectitude of our moral positions, justify our moral actions, and also to effect a change in their moral dispositions. All of these will not be possible for a divine command theorist of morality unless people first accept the basic assumption that God exists. Epistemological problem with God's law and commandments. The divine command theory of morality is confronted with the problem of how to know what God actually commanded or prohibited. There is a general assumption that we cannot get to know what God prescribes or prohibits through a study of the Holy Scriptures. However, the difficulty here is that between religions, for instance Islam and Christianity, there are some conflicts in their accounts of what God has commanded and what he has prohibited. While many Christians interpret the Bible as saying that polygamy is unacceptable, Muslims generally subscribe to the view that, going by the Quran, polygamy is acceptable. Besides, even within the same religion, there are debates over how certain scriptures should be interpreted and what precisely God is saying by them. For instance, "Thou shalt not kill" in Exodus 20:13, and "Concerning the works of my hand, command ye me" in Isaiah 45:11. They have been interpreted differently by Christians. For some, the first scripture means that you should not kill at all, while for others, it means that one should not commit murder, while some other forms of killing might be acceptable. With regards to the second scripture, some Christians have interpreted this to imply that God is calling on his people to command him concerning the works of his hands, while others interpret it to mean that God is asking if people have a right to give him instructions or query him about what he does. From another perspective, it is extremely difficult to know what God is saying about some important moral issues because there are no clear-cut scriptural references to them. Examples of such issues include euthanasia, suicide, and environmental pollution, equality of opportunity, affirmative action, and racism. Most sacred writings were recorded by human beings occupying specific religious positions, such as priests and prophets. The problem here is that it becomes extremely difficult to distinguish what God is saying from what the writer of the sacred writing has added. For instance, there is an opinion that the Ten Commandments presented by Moses to the children of Israel in the wilderness were actually compiled by Moses himself after a careful consideration of the social and moral problems prevailing in the camp of the Israelites at that time. One factor that is alluded to in an attempt to justify this view is that the Ten Commandments were actually very similar to the rules and regulations found among other tribes at that time. It might be contested further that knowing the nature of the crop of people that Moses led out of Egypt as particularly difficult to lead, Moses deliberately presented the Ten Commandments to have originated from God so that they would be more readily accepted by the people. If he had told them that the commandments were arrived at after a careful assessment of the prevailing social conditions in the camp of the Israelites, the people would probably not have accepted them. Problem of arbitrariness of morality. Going by the divine command theory of morality, it is whatever God says that determines what is right or wrong. If God requires or permits something, it is right, irrespective of the nature of what is actually required or permitted. If God prohibits honesty, then honesty becomes morally wrong. And if God requires stealing, it becomes morally good to steal and bad not to. A problem with the position of the divine command theorists of morality is that it does not offer any cogent reason why certain things are prescribed and some others are prohibited by God, beyond the claim that he does. The highest justification that is available would be to simply say that it is either prescribed or prohibited by God. There is no notion of right or wrong outside what God commands and what he prohibits. The implication of these is that morality is completely dependent on whatever God says, and this renders morality quite arbitrary and without any substantial justification. The problem becomes more intensified if we consider the problems we discussed earlier with regards to how to determine what God is saying in the Holy Writings and the conflicting accounts of God's command within given religions and also across several religions. Another theistic position that is quite different from that of the divine command theorist maintains that God actually commands things because he recognizes that they are good and prohibits other things because he sees that they are wrong. This suggests that what actually determines what is right or wrong is outside God. And by his divine nature, he would always command those things that are good because they are good, and also prohibit those things that are bad because they are bad. God will never arbitrarily select some actions to prohibit and some others to recommend. Instead, he always has reasons for his commands and prohibitions. From the above understanding that morality is not dependent on God's will, some theists might contend that given God's nature as omniscient and infallible, he's always able to identify those actions that are actually right or wrong. In addition, we must understand that actions such as murder, rape, and stealing will still be considered to be wrong by people, even if they were commanded by God. Consequently, for the theists, who are not divine command theorists of morality, God's command should be obeyed, not because they have been commanded by God, but simply because he would always command only those things that are morally right and prohibit those things that are morally wrong. The fallacy of appealing to authority. Appealing to the commandments and prohibitions of God as a standard for morality and the final determinants of right and wrong constitutes the fallacy of appeal to authority. To say that an action is right or wrong simply because it is commanded or recommended by God without offering any independent reason to show that the action is actually good or bad is unacceptable. Besides, if we allude to a theistic position that maintains that God commands certain actions because he recognizes that they are actually good, then it follows that humans could come to recognize the actual moral status of actions without any reference to the existence of God or any divine commandments of God. It might be possible to use the human faculty of reason or intuition to discern the moral value of actions. Study session summary. In this study session, we examine the claims of the divine command theory of morality. It is obvious that the position of the divine command theorist is fraught with many difficulties that impinge upon its plausibility. Besides, one tacit implication of the theory is that if it is true, atheists and agnostics will not be able to practice morality. But the truth is that these categories of people effectively practice morality without any allusion to God. And this goes to suggest that morality, contrary to the position of the divine command theory, is not dependent on God's command. End of study session 5. Thank you for listening.